The mop slapped against the linoleum floor of the ready room with the same rhythmic precision that Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had perfected over her 3 years at Nellis Air Force Base. At 5:30 hours, while the pilots were still nursing their first cups of coffee and studying weather reports, she was already 40 minutes into her shift, methodically cleaning the spaces where heroes prepared for flight. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the rows of empty chairs that would soon hold some of the most elite fighter pilots in the world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maria had never imagined this would be her life when she enlisted 4 years ago. She'd scored high enough on the ASVAB to qualify for any number of technical specialties, but fate and a recruiter's promise of quick advancement had landed her in services, the unglamorous world of food service, lodging, and maintenance support. While other airmen worked on million-dollar aircraft or managed complex communication systems, Maria's domain consisted of industrial-strength cleaning supplies, commercial kitchen equipment, and the endless task of keeping the base's facilities spotless. But Maria Santos was not ordinary, though no one at Nellis knew it yet. Born in East Los Angeles to immigrant parents who worked double shifts to keep their family afloat, she'd learned early that survival meant being invisible while staying absolutely aware of everything around you. Her father, a mechanic who'd served briefly in the Mexican Air Force before coming to America, had taught her to read aircraft by their sounds, their movements, their subtle tells that most people missed. Her mother, a nurse who'd worked in trauma units across LA, had instilled in her an almost supernatural ability to remain calm under pressure. These skills might have seemed useless for someone whose primary job was mopping floors and restocking soap dispensers, but Maria had been using them for months to do something that would have shocked her supervisors. She'd been learning to fly. Not in any official capacity, of course. Her security clearance didn't extend to classified flight operations, and her rank certainly didn't grant her access to the F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightning IIs that screamed across the Nevada desert daily. But Maria had discovered something that the pilots, in their focus on advanced avionics and tactical maneuvers, had completely overlooked: the base's old flight simulator building. Building 847 had been scheduled for demolition for 2 years, but budget cuts and bureaucratic delays had left it standing, empty, officially decommissioned, but still powered due to an oversight in the electrical grid management. Inside, covered by dust and neglect, sat 6 flight simulators from the early 2000s, primitive by modern standards, but sophisticated enough to teach the fundamental principles of flight dynamics, weapon systems, and combat tactics. Maria had first discovered the building during a routine cleaning sweep of abandoned facilities. What started as curiosity had evolved into obsession. Using maintenance access codes that technically remained valid due to administrative oversight, she'd been slipping into Building 847 after her shifts for 8 months, teaching herself everything from basic flight principles to advanced combat maneuvers. She'd started with online tutorials, military flight manuals she'd downloaded from publicly available sources, and even reached out anonymously to pilot forums where active duty aviators shared experiences and techniques. Her mechanical aptitude, inherited from her father, helped her understand the technical systems. Her natural spatial intelligence, which had gone unrecognized in her current role, allowed her to master complex three-dimensional thinking required for aerial combat. The simulators were networked, allowing for multi-aircraft exercises, and Maria had learned to run complex scenarios where she controlled multiple aircraft, developing an intuitive understanding of flight tactics that typically took years of formal training to acquire. She'd memorized the specifications of every aircraft in the Air Force inventory, studied classified tactics manuals she'd found in disposal bins marked for shredding but never processed, and even learned to operate the base's communication frequencies by listening to radio chatter during her cleaning duties. What Maria didn't know was that her late-night activities had not gone completely unnoticed. The base's automated security systems logged every access, every power spike in Building 847, every anomalous network activity. But these logs were buried in daily reports that junior intelligence officers skimmed through, looking for obvious security breaches, rather than the subtle pattern of someone conducting unauthorized flight training. On this particular morning, as Maria finished mopping the ready room and began arranging chairs for the 0700 briefing, she had no idea that everything was about to change. The routine that had defined her life for 3 years was about to be shattered by events that would test every skill she'd secretly developed and thrust her into a situation where her hidden talents would become the difference between life and death. Outside, the first F-22s of the morning were beginning their pre-flight preparations. Inside, Maria Santos continued her invisible work, unaware that within hours, every pilot on the base would know her call sign and the name Ghost 7 would become legend.
The first indication that this Tuesday morning would be different from any other came at 06:47 hours, 13 minutes before the scheduled pilot briefing. Maria was restocking coffee supplies in the ready room when the base's primary communication system crackled to life with an urgency that made every person within earshot freeze. This is Nellis Tower to all units. We have confirmed radar contact with 6 unidentified aircraft approaching from the northeast at high altitude. Aircraft are not responding to radio contact and are not squawking identification codes. Threat level elevated to DEFCON 3. This is not a drill. Maria's hands stilled on the coffee dispenser. In her months of listening to base communications during her cleaning duties, she'd never heard this level of tension in the tower operators' voices. Around her, the few early arriving pilots immediately abandoned their morning routines, grabbing phones and rushing toward the command center. All available aircraft, prepare for immediate scramble, the tower continued. We need defensive positioning established within 10 minutes. Unknown aircraft are maintaining course directly toward restricted airspace. Through the ready room's large windows, Maria could see the organized chaos beginning on the flight line. Ground crews who had been performing routine maintenance were now racing to prepare aircraft for immediate launch. The sleek F-22 Raptors that normally took 30 minutes of careful pre-flight preparation were being rushed through abbreviated checks, their pilots sprinting across the tarmac, still pulling on flight gear. But something was wrong with the math, and Maria's analytical mind caught it immediately. She'd observed enough morning operations to know the base's aircraft availability by heart. 2 F-22s were down for scheduled maintenance. Another was undergoing engine replacement. 3 more were configured for training exercises with external fuel tanks that would need to be removed before combat operations. The remaining operational fighters were scattered across different squadron assignments, some not even fueled for extended flight. As pilots flooded into the ready room, Maria heard fragments of urgent conversations that confirmed her calculations. They were going to be short on aircraft, and the ones they could get airborne quickly wouldn't be optimally configured for air-to-air combat. How the hell are we supposed to establish a defensive perimeter with 4 aircraft? She heard Major Richardson, the squadron operations officer, hiss into his phone. Those bogies are less than 20 minutes out, and we've got half our birds down for maintenance. Maria continued her cleaning duties, but her mind was racing through possibilities. She'd studied this exact scenario in her secret simulator sessions. Multiple unknown aircraft approaching restricted airspace with insufficient defensive resources available. She'd run hundreds of variations, testing different intercept patterns, weapon deployments, and tactical responses. The pilots were good. She'd watched them train for months, but they were also predictable. Their tactics followed doctrine precisely, which worked well in planned exercises, but could be limiting in fluid situations. Maria had learned to think beyond doctrine, to improvise and adapt in ways that formal training sometimes discouraged. Santos, the sharp voice of Senior Master Sergeant Williams, cut through her thoughts. Clear out of here. This area is now restricted to flight personnel only. Yes, Sergeant, Maria replied automatically, gathering her cleaning supplies. But as she moved toward the exit, she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. The bogies just changed course, a pilot was reporting, studying a tablet displaying real-time radar information. They're not heading for the base anymore. They're turning toward Las Vegas. Las Vegas. 2 million people. including Maria's younger sister Sophia, who was a freshman at UNLV, and their elderly grandmother who lived in a retirement community just off the strip. If these unknown aircraft were hostile, and if they were carrying any kind of weapons, Maria's mind flashed to every tactical scenario she'd studied. Las Vegas was a soft target, minimal air defense, massive civilian population, symbolic value as a target. If someone wanted to make a devastating statement, it would be difficult to find a better location. How the hell are we supposed to establish a defensive perimeter with 4 aircraft? She heard Major Richardson, the squadron operations officer, hiss into his phone. Those bogies are less than 20 minutes out, and we've got half our birds down for maintenance. Maria continued her cleaning duties, but her mind was racing through possibilities. She'd studied this exact scenario in her secret simulator sessions, multiple unknown aircraft approaching restricted airspace with insufficient defensive resources available. She'd run hundreds of variations, testing different intercept patterns, weapon deployments, and tactical responses. The pilots were good. She'd watched them train for months, but they were also predictable. Their tactics followed doctrine precisely, which worked well in planned exercises, but could be limiting in fluid situations. Maria had learned to think beyond doctrine, to improvise and adapt in ways that formal training sometimes discouraged. Santos, the sharp voice of Senior Master Sergeant Williams, cut through her thoughts. Clear out of here. This area is now restricted to flight personnel only. Yes, Sergeant, Maria replied automatically, gathering her cleaning supplies. But as she moved toward the exit, she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. The bogies just changed course, a pilot was reporting, studying a tablet displaying real-time radar information. They're not heading for the base anymore. They're turning toward Las Vegas. Las Vegas. 2 million people, including Maria's younger sister Sophia, who was a freshman at UNLV, and their elderly grandmother who lived in a retirement community just off the strip. If these unknown aircraft were hostile, and if they were carrying any kind of weapons, Maria's mind flashed to every tactical scenario she'd studied. Las Vegas was a soft target, minimal air defense, massive civilian population, symbolic value as a target. If someone wanted to make a devastating statement, it would be difficult to find a better location. How long until our birds are airborne? Major Richardson was demanding. 8 more minutes minimum, and that's pushing every safety protocol we have. Those bogies will be over Vegas in 12 minutes at current speed, another voice added. The math was unforgiving. Even if the F-22s launched immediately, they'd be intercepting over populated areas, potentially causing civilian casualties even if they successfully engaged the threats. And with limited aircraft, they'd be outnumbered and forced into reactive rather than proactive tactics. Maria reached the exit but didn't leave. Instead, she positioned herself just outside the doorway where she could continue listening while appearing to organize her cleaning cart. Her heart was pounding, but her mind was crystal clear, running through every scenario she'd practiced in the simulators. There was one possibility the pilots hadn't considered, mainly because they didn't know it existed. Building 847's simulators were connected to an auxiliary network that, due to the same administrative oversight that kept them powered, still had access to the base's tactical data systems. In theory, someone operating from those simulators could provide real-time intelligence support, coordinate with airborne assets, and even serve as an extra set of eyes for complex tactical situations. In theory, someone with sufficient training could even... All aircraft, this is Nellis Tower, the radio crackled again. Bogies have increased speed and altitude. We're now showing 6 aircraft in tactical formation heading directly for the Vegas metropolitan area. Time to intercept is now 11 minutes. Maria Santos made a decision that would change her life forever. Abandoning her cleaning cart, she began walking quickly toward Building 847, her mind already calculating flight paths, intercept vectors, and the precise sequence of actions that might save 2 million lives.
Building 847 stood like a forgotten monument to military efficiency, its concrete facade weathered by desert winds, but still solid. Maria's hands shook slightly as she entered her maintenance access code, a violation that could end her career even without what she was planning to do next. The heavy door clicked open, and she stepped into the familiar darkness of the abandoned simulator facility. The 6 simulator pods sat in 2 rows, their screens dark but their systems humming quietly with standby power. Maria had spent countless hours in these machines, but never under circumstances like this. She moved to her favorite unit, Simulator 3, which she discovered had the most comprehensive tactical systems still functional, and began the startup sequence she'd memorized months ago. As the screens flickered to life, Maria's earpiece crackled with base communications. She'd learned to monitor multiple frequencies simultaneously, a skill that had seemed like mere curiosity but now proved essential. Nellis Tower, this is Viper 1, she heard Major Richardson's voice, tight with stress. We're airborne, but still climbing to intercept altitude. Bogies are maintaining course toward Vegas. Request permission to go weapons hot. Viper 1, permission granted. You are weapons hot. Be advised, civilian aircraft are being cleared from the area, but there may still be commercial traffic in your vicinity. Maria's hands flew across the simulator's controls, accessing the tactical network interface, the screen populated with real-time radar data showing the unfolding situation with crystal clarity. 6 unknown aircraft in tight formation, now 12 minutes from Las Vegas airspace. 4 F-22s climbing hard to intercept, but their positioning was problematic. They'd be forced to engage from below, negating many of their technological advantages. But there was something else on the screen that made Maria's breath catch. A 7th contact, barely visible and intermittent, shadowing the formation of unknowns. It appeared and disappeared from radar coverage, sometimes showing as a faint blip, sometimes vanishing entirely. The pilots hadn't mentioned it, which meant they either hadn't seen it or their systems weren't detecting it consistently. Maria had seen this before in her simulations, a stealth aircraft using terrain and electronic countermeasures to remain partially hidden. But whose aircraft was it? And was it part of the threat or something else entirely? Her training with the simulator systems allowed her to access communication frequencies that the base's standard equipment couldn't reach. She began scanning through encrypted military channels, listening for any chatter that might explain the mysterious 7th aircraft. This is Ghost 7 to any station. Ghost 7 to any station. A voice suddenly crackled through her headset. Calm, professional, distinctly female. I am tracking 6 hostiles inbound to Las Vegas metro area. Request tactical coordination with Nellis Defensive Forces. Maria's heart stopped. Ghost 7, a call sign she'd never heard in all her months of monitoring base communications. The voice was unfamiliar, but the tactical language was precise, military standard. Someone was already out there, already in position. Ghost 7, this is Nellis Tower, came the response. You are not on our flight manifest. Identify yourself and your aircraft. Nellis Tower, Ghost 7, I'm flying a modified F-16 Block 70. I've been tracking these bogies for 40 minutes. They originated from a private airstrip in Mexico and have been maintaining radio silence throughout their flight. I have visual confirmation of external weapon mounts. Maria's mind raced. A modified F-16 operating independently, tracking hostile aircraft from Mexico? This wasn't a standard military operation. But whoever Ghost 7 was, she was in the perfect position to provide intelligence that could save the intercept mission. Viper 1, this is Nellis Tower. The radio crackled. We have an unknown friendly aircraft, call sign Ghost 7, reporting visual contact with the bogies. Ghost 7, can you provide tactical assessment? Viper 1, Ghost 7, the mysterious pilot responded. I count 6 aircraft in combat spread formation. They appear to be modified civilian aircraft with military-grade weapons. Based on their flight profile, they're not planning to land. This looks like a one-way attack run. Maria stared at her screen, watching the tactical situation unfold. The F-22s were still climbing, still minutes away from intercept. Ghost 7 was in position, but apparently alone. 6 hostile aircraft with unknown capabilities heading for a civilian target. And then Maria realized something that made her blood run cold.
The attack formation's approach vector wasn't random. It was specifically designed to exploit a gap in Las Vegas's limited air defense coverage. Whoever had planned this attack knew exactly what they were doing, and they'd chosen their route to maximize the chance of reaching their target unopposed. But Maria had studied exactly this scenario. She'd run it hundreds of times in different variations, looking for the optimal intercept pattern. She knew how to coordinate multiple aircraft to create an impenetrable defensive screen, how to use geography and timing to force hostile aircraft into kill zones where they'd be vulnerable despite their numbers. But the problem was that the knowledge existed only in her head and in the simulator databanks that no one else knew about. Ghost 7, Viper 1, Major Richardson's voice cut through the radio chatter. What's your weapon status? Viper 1, I'm carrying 2 IM-120s and a full load of 20mm. I can engage, but I'll need support for a coordinated attack. Maria's hands moved to the simulator's communication controls. What she was about to do was completely unauthorized, potentially criminal, and almost certainly career-ending. But as she watched the hostile aircraft continue their approach toward her sister and grandmother and 2 million other innocent people, she knew she had no choice. She opened a communication channel and spoke into her microphone with a steady voice that betrayed none of the terror and determination coursing through her.
Ghost 7, this is Control. I have tactical coordination capability and full situational awareness. Do you copy? There was a pause that felt like an eternity before Ghost 7's voice came back through Maria's headset, crisp and professional despite the chaos surrounding them. Control, Ghost 7 copies. What's your position and capabilities? Maria's mouth went dry. She was sitting in an abandoned building, operating equipment that wasn't supposed to exist, claiming authority she absolutely didn't have. But the tactical display in front of her showed those 6 hostile aircraft getting closer to Las Vegas every second, and she was possibly the only person who could see the complete picture. Ghost 7, I have full situational awareness from multiple sensor sources, Maria replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I can see optimal intercept vectors that will maximize your effectiveness and coordinate with the Vipers. She wasn't lying. The simulator's tactical systems were somehow still connected to the base's main radar network, probably through the same administrative oversight that had kept the building powered. The display in front of her showed every aircraft in the area with unprecedented clarity, including flight paths, speeds, and projected intercept points. Ghost 7 Control. I'm listening. Maria's hands flew across the simulator controls, calculating intercept angles and timing. Her months of secret training had prepared her for exactly the scenario, though she'd never imagined she'd be coordinating real aircraft with live weapons. Ghost 7, the bogies are maintaining formation at Angels 2-5, speed 470 knots. Viper 1 is climbing through Angels 18, but they're approaching from the south. If you can position yourself at bearing 045 from their formation, you can force them into a bracket between yourself and the Vipers. Copy Control. Moving to bearing 045. Viper 1, do you copy this frequency? Ghost 7, Viper 1 copies. Major Richardson's voice came through, strained but professional. Control, who the hell are you and where are you getting this tactical picture? Maria's heart hammered in her chest. She was definitely going to prison for this, but Las Vegas was now less than 8 minutes away from those hostile aircraft. Viper 1, Control. I have access to enhanced sensor data and tactical computing capability. Recommend you adjust your intercept to bearing 270, maintain current climb rate. This will give you optimal firing position when Ghost 7 initiates her attack run. She watched the tactical display as the F-22s adjusted their course. The pilots were following her directions, which meant they were trusting her with their lives and the lives of everyone in Las Vegas. Ghost 7, Control. I'm in position. I have visual on all 6 bogies. They're definitely carrying external weapons, looks like air-to-surface missiles. Ghost 7, Control copies. Viper 1, are you in position? Control, Viper 1, we're at Angels 2-2 bearing 275 from the bogies. We have radar lock on multiple targets. Maria stared at her screen, running calculations that would determine whether millions of people lived or died. The hostile aircraft were in a tight formation, which made them vulnerable to a coordinated attack, but also meant that any mistakes could be catastrophic. If the timing wasn't perfect, some of them would break through to Las Vegas. All units, Control, initiate attack in 3,
2, 1, execute. On her screen, Maria watched as Ghost 7's aircraft dove toward the hostile formation from above and ahead, while the 4 F-22s climbed into firing position from behind and below. The tactic was called a bracket ambush, something she'd perfected in hundreds of simulator runs, but had never seen executed in real life. Viper 1, Fox 3, Major Richardson's voice shouted over the radio as he fired his first missile. Ghost 7, Fox 3. The mysterious pilot's voice followed immediately. Maria watched breathlessly as the missiles streaked toward their targets. The hostile aircraft, caught completely off guard by the coordinated attack from multiple directions, broke formation and attempted evasive maneuvers. But it was too late. They'd been caught in the perfect tactical trap. Splash 1, Ghost 7 reported. 1 bogey down. Splash 2, Viper 2 called out. Confirmed kill. The tactical display showed the remaining 4 hostile aircraft scattering, their tight formation destroyed. But they were still armed, still heading towards civilian areas, and now they were unpredictable. Control, Ghost 7. The remaining bogies are splitting up. 2 are heading toward downtown Vegas, 2 toward the airport area. We need immediate intercept before they reach populated areas. Maria's mind raced through tactical options. 4 hostile aircraft, now separated and desperate, against 5 friendly aircraft. The math should have been in their favor, but the scattered targets meant divided attention and increased risk of 1 or more getting through to populated areas. All units, control, Viper 1 and 2, pursue the 2 bogies heading for downtown. Viper 3 and 4, take the airport group. Ghost 7, you're free to engage targets of opportunity. Control, Ghost 7, copies. I'm going after the downtown group. They're the bigger threat to civilian population. As Maria coordinated the pursuit, she realized something that made her stomach clench with new fear. The hostile aircraft weren't just attacking randomly. Their new flight paths showed they were heading for specific targets. The 2 going downtown were aimed directly at the cluster of major casinos and hotels on the Strip. The 2 heading for the airport weren't just trying to disrupt air traffic, they were flying toward the aviation fuel storage tanks that, if hit, would create a massive explosion visible from orbit. All units, control, Major Richardson said. Urgently, the bogies are targeting specific infrastructure. Downtown group appears to be heading for the Strip hotels. Airport group is heading for fuel storage. We need immediate intercept before they reach populated areas.
The next 3 minutes unfolded like a deadly chess match played at supersonic speeds. Maria watched her tactical display as friendly and hostile aircraft maneuvered through 3-dimensional space, each movement potentially determining the fate of hundreds of thousands of people below. Viper 1, I have tone on bogey 3. Major Richardson's voice crackled with tension. He's diving toward the Strip. I need a clean shot. Viper 1, take the shot, Maria responded instantly, watching the geometry of the engagement. Bogey 4 is breaking left. Viper 2, you have a firing solution in approximately 8 seconds. The coordination required split-second timing and 3-dimensional thinking that pushed even experienced pilots to their limits. But Maria's months of simulator training had prepared her to visualize complex aerial engagements as if she were watching from above, seeing patterns and opportunities that individual pilots might miss while focused on their immediate threats. Fox 3, Viper 1 called out, followed immediately by Splash 3, downtown bogey is down. But the celebration was premature. The 4th aircraft in the downtown group had used his wingman's destruction as cover, diving low and fast toward the heart of the Strip. On Maria's screen, she could see he was now below the effective engagement altitude for the F-22s. They couldn't fire without risking civilian casualties from debris or missed shots. Viper 2, hold fire, Maria commanded. Bogey 4 is too low over populated areas. Control, I have to take this shot, Viper 2 responded desperately. He's 30 seconds from target. Viper 2, negative. Ghost 7, are you in position for a low-altitude intercept? Control, Ghost 7, I'm diving now. This is going to be close. Maria's heart pounded as she watched Ghost 7's aircraft plunge toward the low-flying hostile, both aircraft now screaming through the corridors between Las Vegas high-rises at speeds that left no margin for error. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, and the mysterious pilot would either miss her target or crash into a building herself. Ghost 7, you have firing solution in 5 seconds, Maria called out, calculating angles and closure rates with desperate precision. Target is maintaining course toward the MGM Grand Complex. Control, Ghost 7, I see him, taking the shot.
Go 7 Fox 2, the pilot's voice was calm despite the impossible circumstances. Maria watched the missile streak between buildings, pursuing the hostile aircraft through an urban canyon at an altitude no fighter pilot should have to operate. For a moment, it looked like the missile might impact a building instead of its target. Splash 4, Go 7's voice came through with obvious relief. Downtown threat eliminated. But even as Maria felt a surge of hope, her attention was drawn to the other side of her tactical display. The 2 hostile aircraft heading from McCarran International Airport had split up, and the situation there was deteriorating rapidly. Viper 3, I've lost radar contact on Bogey 6, came a panicked voice. He disappeared into ground clutter near the fuel storage area. Maria's blood ran cold. Ground clutter meant the aircraft was flying extremely low, using buildings and terrain to hide from radar. It was a technique that required exceptional skill, but made the aircraft nearly invisible to conventional tracking systems. Viper 3 control. Bogey 6 is approximately 2 miles southeast of your position, altitude less than 500 feet. He's using the industrial area for cover. Control, how can you see him when I can't? It was a good question, and one Maria couldn't answer without revealing that she was operating equipment that technically didn't exist. The simulator's tactical systems apparently had access to sensor data that individual aircraft didn't receive, including ground-based radar installations and possibly even satellite feeds. Viper 3 control, Bogey 6 is now 1 mile from the fuel storage area. You need visual contact immediately. Control, I'm looking, but I don't see... Wait, I've got him! Low and fast, heading straight for the tank farm. Viper 3, you are cleared to engage. Control, I don't have a clean shot. He's too close to the storage tanks. If I miss, I could hit them myself. Maria's mind raced through possibilities. The hostile aircraft was seconds away from its target, flying too low and too close to critical infrastructure for a conventional missile engagement. But there was one option that might work. A gun run that would require incredible precision and nerves of steel. Viper 3 switched to guns, close to minimum range and taken with the 20mm cannon. Control, that's insane! At these speeds, at this altitude? Viper 3, it's the only option. Go 7, can you assist? Control, Go 7, I'm already on my way. Viper 3, I'll bracket him from the opposite side. Between the two of us, we can box him in. Maria watched both aircraft dive toward the final hostile, who was now mere seconds from reaching the fuel storage facility. The timing had to be perfect. One aircraft approaching from each side, forcing the hostile into the middle where he couldn't maneuver without exposing himself to gunfire. Viper 3, Go 7, execute on my mark, Maria called out, watching the convergence angles. 3, 2, 1, mark!
The sound of 20mm cannon fire echoed across the Las Vegas Valley as 2 aircraft simultaneously opened fire on the final hostile. Maria watched her tactical display with held breath as tracers converged from opposite directions, creating a deadly crossfire that left the enemy aircraft with nowhere to maneuver. Splash 6, Viper 3's voice came through, shaky with adrenaline. Final bogey is down. Repeat, all hostiles have been eliminated. The tactical display showed debris falling toward the desert floor, well short of the fuel storage facility. Maria slumped back in her simulator chair, suddenly aware that her hands were trembling and her heart was hammering against her ribs. It was over. 6 hostile aircraft had been destroyed, Las Vegas was safe, and somehow she had coordinated the entire engagement from a building that wasn't supposed to exist. Control, this is Nellis Tower, came the official voice of the base's air traffic control. Outstanding work. All aircraft return to base for debriefing. The airspace is now secure. Ghost 7, this is Control, Maria said into her microphone, suddenly realizing she needed to know who this mysterious pilot was. Before you head back to base, I need to know. Who are you? There was a long pause before Ghost 7 responded, and when she did, her voice carried a tone that Maria couldn't quite identify. Part amusement, part respect, part something else entirely. Control. Ghost 7, I think the better question is who are you? Because what you just did, coordinating a 6 aircraft engagement with that level of precision, that's not standard air traffic control capability. Maria's mouth dried. She'd been so focused on the immediate crisis that she hadn't considered what would happen afterward. How was she going to explain her unauthorized access to classified tactical systems? How was she going to justify her presence in a building that was supposed to be empty? Control, that's complicated.
Control, I'm sure it is. But before we both have some very difficult conversations with base security, I want you to know that what you did today saved a lot of lives. You have a natural talent for tactical coordination that I've rarely seen, even among experienced combat controllers. Thank you, Ghost 7, but I'm probably going to be arrested as soon as I walk out of here. Maybe, Ghost 7 replied, with what sounded like a chuckle. Or maybe you're about to get the opportunity of a lifetime. Control, what's your real name? Maria hesitated. Once she revealed her identity, there would be no going back. Her secret training, her unauthorized access to classified systems, her violation of dozens of military regulations, it would all come out. But somehow, after what they'd just been through together, she felt she owed this mysterious pilot the truth. Ghost 7, my name is Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, 99th Force Support Squadron. The pause that followed was so long that Maria wondered if she'd lost communication. When Ghost 7 finally spoke again, there was something new in her voice. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. Maria Santos? You're the airman who's been using the old simulators in Building 847? Maria's blood turned to ice water. You knew about that? Maria, this is Colonel Sarah Chen, 64th Aggressor Squadron. And yes, I've been knowing about your nighttime training sessions for about 3 months now. The world seemed to tilt around Maria. Ghost 7 wasn't some mysterious unknown pilot. She was a full colonel from Nellis Air Force Base's elite aggressor squadron, the unit responsible for training other pilots in enemy tactics and advanced aerial combat. Colonel, I can explain. No need to explain, Sergeant. I've been watching your progress through the base's security monitoring systems. What you've accomplished on your own with obsolete equipment and no formal instruction is extraordinary. Most of our new pilots can't coordinate complex engagements the way you just did, even after months of formal training. Maria's mind reeled. You've been watching me? The 64th Aggressor Squadron is always looking for exceptional talent regardless of where we find it. When I saw the security reports showing someone conducting advanced tactical training in Building 847, I had to investigate. I've been monitoring your sessions for weeks, Maria. Your natural aptitude for three-dimensional tactical thinking is remarkable. But I violated so many regulations. Yes, you did, Colonel Chen replied matter-of-factly, and under normal circumstances, that would result in disciplinary action, possibly court-martial. But these aren't normal circumstances. What you did today, coordinating a complex air defense engagement, saving potentially hundreds of thousands of civilian lives, that changes things. Maria heard the sound of aircraft engines growing louder, and through the windows of Building 847, she could see 2 F-16s approaching the airfield. One of them, she realized, must be Colonel Chen's aircraft. Maria, I'm going to make you an offer. But first, you need to understand that this conversation never happened through official channels. When security asks you how you accessed those tactical systems, you're going to tell them that you received emergency authorization from a senior officer whose identity is classified. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, I understand. Good. Because tomorrow morning, you're going to receive orders transferring you to the 64th Aggressor Squadron. You're going to begin formal flight training immediately, with a specialty in tactical coordination and air battle management. Your unauthorized training sessions are going to become the foundation for the most accelerated pilot development program this base has ever seen. Maria could barely process what she was hearing. Colonel, are you saying? I'm saying, Sergeant Santos, that Ghost 7 is about to become a lot more than just a call sign. Welcome to the real war.
The debriefing room at Nellis Air Force Base had never felt more intimidating to Maria Santos than it did at 1400 hours that afternoon. She sat at a metal table, still wearing her maintenance utilities, facing a panel of officers whose combined rank probably outweighed the gross domestic product of some small countries. At the head of the table sat Brigadier General Patricia Morrison, the base commander, whose steely gray eyes seemed to see through Maria's skull and read her thoughts directly. To the general's left sat Colonel Sarah Chen, now in standard flight suit rather than the combat gear she'd worn during the morning's engagement. She looked exactly as Maria had imagined, mid-40s, athletic build, sharp, intelligent eyes, and the confident bearing of someone who'd spent decades in high-performance aircraft. To the general's right sat Colonel James Rodriguez, the base intelligence officer, and Major Richardson, who kept glancing at Maria with a mixture of confusion and grudging respect. "Sergeant Santos," General Morrison began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Let's start with the simple questions. How did you gain access to the tactical coordination systems used during this morning's engagement?" Maria had rehearsed this answer for hours, following Colonel Chen's guidance. "Ma'am, I received emergency authorization from Colonel Chen to utilize available resources for tactical coordination during the hostile aircraft engagement. And these available resources were located where exactly?" "Building 847, ma'am, the old simulator facility." Colonel Rodriguez leaned forward, consulting a tablet. "Sergeant, Building 847 has been officially decommissioned for 2 years. How did you know those systems were still operational?" This was the dangerous part. Maria had to be truthful enough to be believable while avoiding any mention of her months of unauthorized training. "Sir, I discovered the building systems were still powered during routine maintenance checks. When the emergency began, I recognized that the tactical systems might be useful for coordination purposes. And you knew how to operate advanced tactical coordination systems because—" General Morrison's tone suggested she already suspected the answer wouldn't satisfy her. "Ma'am, I've studied military tactical procedures extensively during my off-duty time. I have a strong background in mechanical systems and computer operations from my civilian education." It wasn't technically a lie. Maria had studied tactical procedures extensively, just not in any official capacity, and she did have mechanical and computer skills from her pre-military life. Major Richardson spoke up, his voice still carrying traces of the morning's adrenaline. "General, I don't care where Sergeant Santos learned her skills. What she did this morning was extraordinary. The tactical coordination was flawless, better than anything I've seen from our trained combat controllers." "That's precisely what concerns me, Major," General Morrison replied sharply. "Flawless tactical coordination doesn't happen by accident. It requires extensive training, detailed knowledge of aircraft capabilities, and familiarity with classified tactical procedures." Colonel Chen had remained silent throughout the questioning, but now she cleared her throat. "General, if I may, Sergeant Santos demonstrated exceptional natural aptitude under extreme circumstances. Rather than focusing on procedural violations, perhaps we should consider how to best utilize this talent." "Colonel Chen, are you suggesting we ignore the fact that an enlisted airman with no flight training and no security clearance for tactical operations somehow gained access to classified systems and coordinated a complex air defense engagement?" "General, I'm suggesting that sometimes exceptional circumstances require exceptional responses. What Sergeant Santos accomplished this morning prevented what could have been one of the worst terrorist attacks in American history." Maria sat quietly, watching the verbal tennis match between officers who would determine her fate. She could feel the weight of careers and protocols balancing against the reality of what had happened in the skies over Las Vegas. "Sergeant Santos," General Morrison said finally, turning her attention back to Maria, "tell me about your background, education, work experience before the Air Force, family history." Maria straightened in her chair. "Ma'am, I graduated valedictorian from Roosevelt High School in East Los Angeles. I completed 2 years of mechanical engineering at UCLA before financial constraints forced me to enlist. My father served briefly in the Mexican Air Force before immigrating to the United States, where he worked as an aircraft mechanic. My mother is a registered nurse with trauma experience." "And what made you choose the Air Force over other service branches?" "Ma'am, I wanted to work with aircraft. My father taught me that aviation represents the cutting edge of technology and human capability. I thought the Air Force would provide the best opportunities for advancement and technical training." "Yet you ended up in services rather than a technical career field." Maria hesitated. This was where her story became more personal, more painful.
Ma'am, my recruiter assured me that services would provide quick promotion opportunities and that I could cross-train into technical fields later. When I arrived at basic training, I discovered that the promises made during recruitment weren't entirely accurate. General Morrison's expression softened slightly. So, you've been stuck mopping floors and cleaning buildings for 3 years, despite having the intellectual capability for much more demanding work. Ma'am, I've tried to make the best of my situation. I've used my off-duty time to continue learning and developing skills that might eventually allow me to contribute more meaningfully to the mission. Colonel Rodriguez consulted his tablet again. Sergeant, your personnel file shows consistently outstanding performance evaluations, multiple commendations for initiative and reliability, and completion of several professional military education courses ahead of schedule. Your supervisors consistently rate you as having leadership potential far exceeding your current position. Yes, sir. It also shows 3 requests for retraining into technical career fields, all denied due to manning requirements in your current specialty. Maria's jaw tightened. Those denials had been some of the most frustrating moments of her military career, bureaucratic roadblocks that had kept her trapped in a job that utilized perhaps 10% of her actual capabilities. General, Colonel Chen interjected. I'd like to propose a solution that addresses both the irregularities of this morning's events and the obvious waste of human resources represented by Sergeant Santos's current assignment. General Morrison raised her eyebrow. I'm listening, Colonel. The 64th Aggressor Squadron has authorization for a special program designed to rapidly develop unconventional tactical capabilities. We are authorized to recruit personnel from any career field, regardless of traditional qualifications, based solely on demonstrated aptitude and performance under pressure. You want to make a maintenance airman into a pilot? I want to make an exceptionally talented individual into whatever she's capable of becoming. This morning proved that Sergeant Santos has tactical abilities that can't be taught through conventional training. Those abilities could be invaluable in preparing our pilots for the kind of unconventional threats we face today.
General Morrison leaned back in her chair, studying Maria with the intense focus of someone making a decision that could affect national security. The room fell silent, except for the distant sound of aircraft operations continuing outside, the normal rhythm of military aviation that had been so violently disrupted just hours earlier. Colonel Chen, the general said finally, explain to me exactly what you're proposing. Ma'am, the 64th Aggressor Squadron operates under special authorities that allow for rapid personnel development in support of national defense priorities. This morning's attack demonstrates that we're facing threats that don't follow conventional patterns. The attackers used modified civilian aircraft, unconventional approach routes, and tactics specifically designed to exploit gaps in our standard defensive procedures. Colonel Chen stood and moved to a wall-mounted display screen, pulling up a tactical overview of the morning's engagement. Sergeant Santos identified and countered these unconventional tactics using methods that our traditionally trained personnel didn't recognize. She saw patterns and solutions that emerged from thinking outside established doctrine. Maria watched as the colonel highlighted the intercept vectors and timing sequences that had made the successful defense possible. Seeing it displayed graphically, even she was somewhat amazed at the complexity of what they'd accomplished. Our current pilot training programs are excellent for conventional scenarios, Colonel Chen continued, but they may not be adequate for the kind of asymmetric threats we're increasingly facing. Sergeant Santos represents a different approach, someone who learned tactics through simulation and theoretical study rather than formal military training. That unconventional background allowed her to see solutions that conventionally trained officers missed. Are you saying our pilot training is inadequate, Colonel? General Morrison's tone carried a warning. Not inadequate, ma'am, just potentially incomplete. We train our pilots to execute established tactics with precision and efficiency. But what happens when the enemy doesn't follow the established patterns? What happens when the threat comes from directions and uses methods that our doctrine doesn't anticipate? Major Richardson nodded vigorously. General, I've been flying fighters for 12 years, and I've never seen tactical coordination like what Sergeant Santos provided this morning. She was thinking 3 moves ahead, anticipating how the enemy would respond to our actions, and positioning us to counter their responses before they even made them. That level of tactical anticipation typically requires years of experience, Colonel Rodriguez added, consulting his notes. Yet, Sergeant Santos accomplished it on her first real engagement. General Morrison turned her attention back to Maria. Sergeant, do you understand what Colonel Chen is proposing? I believe so, ma'am. She's suggesting that I could contribute to pilot training programs by providing perspective on unconventional tactical approaches. More than that, Colonel Chen interjected. I'm proposing that you enter an accelerated development program that would include flight training, advanced tactical education, and eventual assignment as a test pilot for unconventional warfare scenarios. Maria's heart nearly stopped. Ma'am, you're talking about making me a pilot? I'm talking about making you whatever you're capable of becoming. Your performance this morning suggests that your capabilities extend far beyond what traditional career progression would allow you to demonstrate. The room fell silent again as General Morrison considered the proposal. Maria could see the internal calculation happening behind the general's eyes, weighing unprecedented circumstances against established procedures, immediate security needs against long-term institutional stability. Sergeant Santos, the general said finally, if we were to approve such a program, it would require you to maintain absolute secrecy about this morning's events. The official record will show that the hostile aircraft were intercepted by routine defensive patrols, with tactical coordination provided by standard base operations. Your role will remain classified at the highest levels. I understand, ma'am. You would also be required to commit to a minimum of 6 years of additional service, during which time you would be available for assignment to any mission deemed critical to national security. Some of these assignments might involve significant personal risk. Maria thought about her sister Sophia, her grandmother, her parents who had sacrificed so much to give her opportunities they'd never had. 6 more years would be a significant commitment, but it would also be 6 years of doing work that actually mattered, using abilities she'd never been allowed to develop in her current role. Ma'am, I accept those conditions. Colonel Chen, what kind of timeline are you proposing for this development program? General, I'd like to begin immediately with intensive tactical training and basic flight instruction. Sergeant Santos has already demonstrated advanced understanding of aerial combat principles. We need to give her hands-on experience to match her theoretical knowledge. I estimate 6 months for basic pilot qualification, followed by 12 months of advanced tactical training. That's extremely accelerated compared to standard pilot training. Yes, ma'am. But Sergeant Santos isn't starting from zero. Her simulator experience and self-directed study have given her a foundation that would normally take months to establish. We're essentially formalizing and expanding knowledge she already acquired. General Morrison stood, indicating that the debriefing was approaching a conclusion. Very well. Colonel Chen, you have authorization to proceed with your special development program. Sergeant Santos, effective immediately, you are reassigned to the 64th Aggressor Squadron with a temporary specialty code pending completion of pilot training. Maria struggled to process what she was hearing. Less than 8 hours ago, she had been mopping floors and emptying trash cans. Now she was being offered the opportunity to become a pilot, something she dreamed about but never dared to hope for. However, the general continued, this program is entirely conditional. Any breach of security protocols, any failure to meet performance standards, any indication that this decision was incorrect, and you will return to your previous assignment with appropriate disciplinary action. Is that clear? Perfectly clear, ma'am. Good. Colonel Chen, I want weekly progress reports. Major Richardson, you're assigned as liaison between the 64th Aggressor Squadron and this project. Gentlemen,
Ladies, this briefing is classified top secret. Nothing discussed in here leaves this room without my specific authorization. As the officers began filing out of the room, Colonel Chen approached Maria. Sergeant, or should I say Lieutenant Santos, report to Building 847 at 0600 tomorrow morning. We're going to begin turning those simulator skills into real-world capabilities. Maria's head spun. Lieutenant? Pilots are officers, Maria. Congratulations, you just received a field promotion and a complete career change in the same day.
6 months later, Maria Santos stood on the flight line at Nellis Air Force Base, but the woman staring at the sleek F-16 Fighting Falcon, bearing the call sign Ghost 7, was fundamentally different from the staff sergeant who had mopped floors in this same location half a year earlier. Second Lieutenant Santos now wore the flight suit of a qualified pilot, with wings pinned to her chest and the confident bearing of someone who had discovered her true calling. The transformation hadn't been easy. The accelerated pilot training program that Colonel Chen had designed pushed Maria to her absolute limits and beyond. 18-hour days were routine, combining intensive flight instruction, advanced tactical theory, weapons systems training, and physical conditioning that left her exhausted but exhilarated. Where traditional pilot training took 18 months, Maria had compressed the essential elements into 6 months of relentless focus and determination. Her instructors had initially been skeptical, some openly hostile, to the idea of fast-tracking an enlisted airman with no formal aviation background. But Maria's performance in the cockpit quickly silenced the doubters. Her simulator experience translated seamlessly to actual flight, and her unconventional background allowed her to approach problems from angles that traditionally trained pilots never considered. Ready for your final evaluation flight, Ghost 7? Colonel Chen approached across the tarmac, wearing her own flight gear. Over the past 6 months, the colonel had become more than just Maria's commanding officer. She had become a mentor, pushing Maria to excel while protecting her from the institutional resistance that had tried to derail the program multiple times. "Ready as I'll ever be, ma'am," Maria replied, running through her pre-flight mental checklist. Today's evaluation would determine whether she graduated to full pilot status or was returned to her previous assignment in services. The pressure was enormous, but it was the kind of pressure she learned to thrive under. "Maria, you've already proven yourself in every measurable way," Colonel Chen said, her voice carrying both confidence and concern. "Your flight scores are in the top 5% of all graduates from this base. Your tactical understanding exceeds that of pilots with years of experience. But today isn't just about flying. It's about demonstrating that you can handle the unexpected under pressure." The evaluation flight was designed to test everything Maria had learned in the most challenging scenarios possible. She would face multiple simulated threats, equipment failures, weather complications, and tactical problems that required split-second decision-making and flawless execution. Other pilots called it the Crucible, a test that pushed candidates to their breaking point to determine who had the mental and physical capabilities required for combat aviation. "What can you tell me about the scenario?" Maria asked as she began her external inspection of the aircraft. "Nothing specific," Colonel Chen replied with a slight smile. "But I will say this, everything you've learned in the past 6 months will be tested today. Trust your training, trust your instincts, and remember that sometimes the best solution is the one that breaks conventional rules." As Maria completed her pre-flight inspection, her mind drifted to the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. The morning when she'd coordinated the Las Vegas air defense felt like a lifetime ago, yet the skills she'd used that day remained at the core of everything she'd learned since. The ability to see the big picture, to anticipate enemy actions, to coordinate complex operations under pressure, these talents had been refined and enhanced through formal training, but they'd originated from her months of secret simulator sessions. Ghost 7, Tower, came the radio call as Maria strapped into her aircraft. "You are cleared for takeoff. Contact departure control on frequency 327.4 for tactical scenario initiation." Tower, Ghost 7 copies, cleared for takeoff. The F-16's engine spooled up with a sound that never failed to thrill Maria.
pure power waiting to be unleashed. As she rolled down the runway and lifted into the Nevada sky, she felt the familiar rush of freedom and purpose that flying provided. This was what she'd been meant to do, what all her struggles and setbacks had been preparing her for. Ghost 7, departure control, came the next radio call. Contact red flag control on frequency 238.6. Your evaluation scenario begins in 30 seconds. Red Flag was Nellis Air Force Base's premier combat training exercise, a realistic warfare simulation that prepared pilots for actual combat operations. Being tested in a red flag scenario meant facing the most advanced training available anywhere in the world. Red Flag Control, Ghost 7, checking in, ready for evaluation scenario. Red Flag Control, Ghost 7, be advised. You are entering a high-threat environment. Multiple hostile aircraft, surface-to-air missile threats, and communications jamming are active. Your mission is to provide tactical coordination for a 4-ship flight of F-22s while neutralizing threats to a simulated civilian population center. You have 30 minutes to accomplish mission objectives. Maria's heart rate increased as she processed the scenario. This wasn't just a test of her flying skills, but a recreation of the type of tactical situations she'd faced during the Las Vegas attack, but with additional complications and multiple friendly aircraft to coordinate. It was like a Las Vegas engagement, but exponentially more difficult. Viper Flight, Ghost 7, she called over the radio. I have tactical control, beginning threat assessment and engagement planning. As Maria began analyzing the tactical situation, she realized that Colonel Chen hadn't been exaggerating about the difficulty of this evaluation. This scenario was designed to test not just her individual flying skills, but her ability to function as a tactical coordinator while simultaneously managing her own aircraft in a high-threat environment. It was exactly the kind of challenge she'd been preparing for her entire life.
The simulated battlefield unfolded on Maria's tactical display like a deadly three-dimensional chess game. 6 hostile aircraft were approaching from multiple vectors, their flight paths designed to overwhelm conventional defensive responses. Surface-to-air missile sites created corridors of lethal airspace that friendly aircraft would need to navigate while engaging aerial threats. Electronic jamming was disrupting communications intermittently, forcing her to coordinate complex maneuvers with incomplete information. But Maria had faced these challenges before, and the months of intensive training had sharpened her natural abilities to a razor's edge. She began issuing tactical instructions with the calm precision that had made her legendary among the pilots at Nellis. Viper Flight, Ghost 7. We have multiple threats requiring coordinated response. Viper 1 and 2 establish high-altitude cap at Angels 30, bearing 090. Viper 3 and 4, low-altitude sweep from the southwest to bracket the primary threat formation. Ghost 7, Viper 1 climbing to Angels 30, what's your assessment of the threat aircraft? Maria's eyes moved rapidly across her display, analyzing flight patterns, speeds, and approach vectors. Viper 1, I'm showing 6 hostiles in 2 separate formations. Primary threat is 4 aircraft approaching the population center from the north. Secondary threat is 2 aircraft on a flanking maneuver from the west. They're trying to split our defensive response. What made this scenario particularly challenging was that the hostile aircraft weren't following predictable patterns. They were adapting to defensive maneuvers in real time, changing course and altitude to exploit weaknesses in the friendly aircraft positioning. It required constant recalculation and adjustment of tactical plans. Viper 3, Ghost 7, Maria called out as she watched the western formation change course. Advise you have 2 bandits turning toward your 6 o'clock. Recommend immediate defensive turn to bearing 270. Ghost 7, Viper 3 turning defensive. Thanks for the heads up. But even as she coordinated the engagement of multiple threats, Maria realized there was something wrong with the scenario. The hostile aircraft were operating with a level of coordination and tactical sophistication that seemed beyond the capabilities of typical training scenarios. Their movements suggested they were being directed by someone with advanced knowledge of air combat tactics. Ghost 7, Viper 2, came an urgent voice over the radio. I'm being painted by multiple SAM sites. They're trying to lock me up.
The surface-to-air missile sites were indeed tracking Viper 2, but their positioning created an opportunity that Maria recognized immediately. If she could coordinate the timing correctly, the SAM site's focus on Viper 2 would create a window for the other aircraft to engage the hostile formations without surface threat. Viper 2, maintain current heading for 15 more seconds, then execute hard defensive turn to bearing 180. Viper 1, when Viper 2 turns defensive, you'll have a clear firing solution on the northern formation. Ghost 7, Viper 1, I see the geometry, standing by for engagement. Maria watched her tactical display as the complex maneuver unfolded. Viper 2 served as bait, drawing the attention of the surface-to-air missile sites while maintaining just enough distance to avoid being shot down. The moment he turned away, Viper 1 would have a clear shot at the primary threat formation. Viper 1, Ghost 7, execute engagement now. Viper 1, Fox 3, Fox 3. Splash 2 came the immediate response. Northern formation is neutralized. But the scenario was far from over. The western formation had broken apart and was now approaching from multiple directions, while additional surface threats were activating across the battlefield. The evaluation was testing not just her ability to coordinate a single engagement, but her capacity to manage a constantly evolving tactical situation. Ghost 7, Viper 4, came a tense voice over the radio. I'm showing multiple new contacts appearing on radar. Looks like we've got reinforcements joining the party. Maria's heart sank as her display populated with additional hostile aircraft, 8 more contacts appearing from various directions. This wasn't just an evaluation of her current skills. It was a test of how she performed when faced with overwhelming odds and impossible circumstances. All Vipers, Ghost 7, we have multiple new threats, but we also have new opportunities. The reinforcements are scattered and uncoordinated. They're not communicating with each other effectively. She was right. The new hostile aircraft were operating independently rather than as a unified threat. That gave her an opportunity to defeat them sequentially rather than facing them as a unified threat. Viper Flight, we're going to use their lack of coordination against them. Viper 1 and 2, engage the eastern group. Viper 3 and 4, take the south approach. I'll coordinate timing to prevent mutual support between hostile formations. For the next 15 minutes, Maria orchestrated one of the most complex air engagements ever conducted in a training scenario. She coordinated 4 F-22s against 14 hostile aircraft while navigating surface-to-air missile threats and communications jamming. Her tactical instructions were precise, her timing was flawless, and her ability to adapt to changing circumstances was extraordinary. Ghost 7, red flag control, came the final radio call of the evaluation. All hostile aircraft have been neutralized. Mission accomplished. Return to base for debriefing. As Maria turned her F-16 toward home, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. She'd not only passed her evaluation, she'd excelled in ways that exceeded even her own expectations. Ghost 7, this is Colonel Chen, came a familiar voice on a discrete frequency. Outstanding performance. When you land, report directly to the squadron commander's office. We need to discuss your next assignment. Copy, Colonel. Can you give me any indication of what we'll be discussing? There was a pause before Colonel Chen responded, and when she did, there was something in her voice that suggested major changes ahead. Maria, that wasn't just an evaluation flight. The threats you faced were based on real intelligence about potential future attacks. Your performance today has qualified you for assignment to a classified program that I can't discuss over the radio. As Nellis Air Force Base appeared ahead of her, Maria realized that her transformation from maintenance airman to combat pilot was just the beginning of her journey. The real war was about to begin.
3 weeks after her evaluation flight, Second Lieutenant Maria Santos stood in a briefing room that didn't officially exist, inside a building that wasn't on any base maps, listening to intelligence briefings about threats that the public would never know about. The transformation from maintenance airman to combat pilot had been remarkable, but her induction into Project Shadowline represented something entirely different. Entry into the world of classified operations that protected American interests in ways the conventional military never could. Ghost 7,
Colonel Chen began, using the call sign that had become Maria's permanent designation. What you're about to see cannot be discussed outside this room, cannot be recorded in any official documents, and cannot be shared with family, friends, or anyone without explicit authorization from the National Security Council. Maria nodded, her security clearance having been elevated to levels she'd never known existed. Around the briefing table sat 8 other pilots, all bearing similar ghost call signs, all with backgrounds as unconventional as her own. She learned that Project Shadowline recruited pilots who thought differently, who could operate outside normal parameters, who could handle threats that defied conventional military response. The attack on Las Vegas 6 months ago was not an isolated incident, Colonel Chen continued, activating a large display screen. Intelligence agencies have identified a network of hostile actors using modified civilian aircraft to conduct terrorist operations worldwide. They're specifically targeting American interests and allies, using tactics designed to exploit gaps in traditional air defense systems. The screen showed a world map with red indicators marking locations where similar attacks had occurred or been planned, a disturbing pattern of increasing frequency and sophistication. Maria recognized several locations as sites where unexplained aircraft incidents had been reported in the news, incidents that now appear to be part of a coordinated campaign. Traditional military responses are inadequate for these threats, Colonel Chen explained. The hostile actors use civilian aircraft and flight paths, operate from private airstrips in countries with limited air traffic control, and employ tactics that make them difficult to detect until they're already approaching their targets. Maria studied the intelligence reports, noting the similarities to the Las Vegas attack. Colonel, are all these incidents related to the same organization? That's classified above your current level, Ghost 7. What I can tell you is that they represent a new type of warfare, asymmetric, unpredictable, and specifically designed to circumvent conventional military capabilities. Ghost 4, a pilot Maria had met briefly during her indoctrination, raised her hand. Ma'am, what's our role in countering these threats? Project Shadowline operates outside normal military channels. We have authority to engage threats before they become conventional military problems. We work with intelligence agencies, foreign allies, and sometimes completely independently to neutralize hostile operations before they reach the planning stage. The implications were staggering. Maria was being invited to join a unit that operated in the gray areas between military action and intelligence operations, engaging threats that couldn't be addressed through normal diplomatic or military channels. Ghost 7, Colonel Chen said, turning her attention specifically to Maria, your performance during the Las Vegas incident and your evaluation flight demonstrated capabilities that are exactly what this program needs. Your ability to coordinate complex operations under pressure, combined with your unconventional background, makes you ideal for the types of missions we conduct. What types of missions, ma'am? Intercepting hostile aircraft over international waters before they reach American airspace, providing tactical support for allied nations facing similar asymmetric threats, conducting reconnaissance operations in areas where intelligence agencies suspect hostile training operations. Maria felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This was far beyond anything she had imagined when she first started her secret simulator training. But it was also exactly the kind of meaningful work she'd always hoped to do, protecting people who would never know they'd been in danger. All Ghost pilots maintain cover assignments with conventional units. Officially, you remain assigned to the 64th Aggressor Squadron. Your Shadowline missions will be conducted under various cover stories, training exercises, equipment testing, diplomatic liaison flights. How often do these missions occur? Frequently enough to keep you busy. The threats we face are increasing in both frequency and sophistication. We need pilots who can adapt quickly, think creatively, and operate effectively with minimal support. Over the following months, Maria's life developed a dual nature that would have been impossible to explain to her family back in Los Angeles. Officially, she was a rising star in the 64th Aggressor Squadron, participating in high-profile training exercises and earning recognition for her exceptional tactical abilities. Unofficially, she was Ghost 7, conducting missions that took her across the globe to counter threats that most people never knew existed. She intercepted suspicious aircraft over the Caribbean before they could approach the American mainland. She provided tactical coordination for Allied air forces facing similar asymmetric threats. She conducted reconnaissance flights over areas where intelligence agencies suspected hostile training operations. Each mission reinforced the importance of the work Project Shadowline was doing. The threats they faced were real, growing, and specifically designed to exploit weaknesses in conventional military responses. Without the unconventional capabilities that Ghost pilots provided, many attacks would succeed simply because traditional forces couldn't adapt quickly enough to counter them. But perhaps most importantly, Maria had found her purpose. The girl who had started mopping floors and dreaming of something greater had become exactly what she'd always been meant to be: a guardian, operating in the shadows, protecting innocent people who would never know they'd been in danger. 6 months after joining Project Shadowline, Maria stood on the flight line at a classified location, preparing for a mission that intelligence agencies believed could prevent the most significant terrorist attack since September 11th. As she walked toward her aircraft, an F-16 bearing no national markings and equipped with capabilities that didn't appear in any technical manuals, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. The maintenance airman who had secretly trained in abandoned simulators had become Ghost 7, one of the most elite pilots in the world, operating at the cutting edge of unconventional warfare. But more than that, she had become exactly what she'd always had the potential to be: someone who made a difference when it mattered most. As she climbed into her cockpit and began pre-flight procedures, Maria smiled with the quiet confidence of someone who had found her calling. Tonight's mission would save lives that would never know they'd been in danger, conducted by a pilot whose name would never appear in history books. And that was exactly how she wanted it.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.